here's what I would say. I've long thought that Iowa may have some problems with those Iowa State DBs, specifically the safeties. However, I saw a little bit of susceptibility, perhaps with a couple. Well, one of which is a young corner, right, for Iowa State. I can't remember his last name.
Jontez Williams.
He showed a little bit of susceptibility on a couple of occasions. I do wonder with Caleb Bacon out how much those safeties might have to cheat down, and perhaps that opens up something down the field for a guy like Vanderzee or a guy like Gill, because of the injury to Bacon specifically, in order to stop that Iowa run game. If Iowa can get that rhythm they had in the second half on the ground, then I think you're going to see that. And then it's a matter of can Cade McNamara get the job done like he did in the second half Saturday. I think that's where the game is won and lost. Now, I do feel pretty good overall. I will say this. I feel, as an Iowa guy, I feel pretty good about Iowa's chances Saturday, not just because it's at home, but, I mean, the defense didn't show much of a chink. Iowa State's going to test them vertically like Illinois State did not. But I just think, based on what we saw in the second half, and if that carries over, Iowa should be able to run the ball effectively, which is going to force John Haycock to play left-handed with those safeties, is my guess.
You covered a few different things that I think are worthy of expanding on here. So, as far as the Caleb Bacon injury thing, going into the season, linebacker was always the spot that everyone was looking like, okay, it's kind of thin there, or it's I don't know, thin, but it's young. It's really young at linebacker, and no question about it. Losing Will McLaughlin and Caleb Bacon hurts, no doubt about it. Fortunately, we did see a couple guys play on Saturday, specifically Cooper Ebel, that I'm very excited about. He played well, and I think he's the next great Iowa State linebacker. I really do. I mean, I think he's AJ Klein, Mike Rose level good, maybe better, or will be better. And then you've got Caleb Brazina. He's just true freshman, but he's, Iowa State does not start freshmen lightly. And that's a guy that has gotten an outrageous amount of hype in the offseason, that he's going to be available this week, and he wasn't last week. Sounds like it was a game time decision last week. They just chose to sit him for an extra week because there's no sense in trying to accumulating more injuries, since there was, I would say, kind of got bit by the injury bug the last couple of weeks. And it's, if there's a concern on the defense, it's at linebacker. And like you said, if I were Iowa, I would attempt to just try to run Caleb Bacon straight at Iowa State all day and night.
Caleb Johnson, you mean?
Or sorry, yeah. What did I say? Did I say Caleb Bacon?
Bacon.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, Caleb Johnson. I would run Caleb Johnson straight at Iowa State for a while and see if you can start getting some space. That's how I would attack if I were Iowa, because Iowa State would love nothing more than to get Cade to throw 35 times in a game. They would love nothing more than to have Cade try to win this game with his arm. Because I
can't see that happening.
I don't see that happening, because I think this game is going to be a really super low possession game. Like, I know the over under set at like 36. I'm not sure it gets there. It's interesting because I think before the season, I would have said, frankly, there was like one key to this entire game, and is Iowa State going to turn the ball over? If Iowa State turns the ball over, Iowa's going to win. If they don't, Iowa State's going to win. And now there's a second key, which is, one, is Iowa State going to turn the ball over? And two, is Iowa's offense to what degree is Iowa's offense real? And that's the other big question here, is because obviously the first half was an abomination. I mean, I think you can agree with that. It was
offensively, but not defensively.
Well, no, but we're not talking about the defense. I mean,
you just said Iowa's defense. How for real is Iowa's defense?
I said offense, didn't I?
Okay, I heard defense. Okay.
How real is Iowa's offense? We're talking about Iowa's offense. So,
okay.
So the first half last week was an abomination. It was somehow worse than last year.
An abomination.
It was somehow worse.
Here we go.
We're using biblical terms.
But anyways, so
nth degree.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
not wrong.
Get your point.
I'm not wrong though.
Against Illinois State in the first half.
I'm not wrong. But so the second half, obviously they ticked it up. Part of it is I think Iowa was trying. It was a pretty big tick up, but it's against Illinois State, and it's the second half of a team that was probably pretty worn down at that point. And I was trying to move the ball vertically. They're trying to get something going in the passing game. So for some context here, because you watch the Iowa State game, and I think a lot of Iowa State fans came out of last Saturday feeling fairly about it, like not disappointed, but just kind of about it. But what's interesting though is, and part of it is because Iowa State they only had they put 21 points on the scoreboard, but there's an outrageous amount of context that needs to be added there is where that one defensive drive, the one North Dakota drive that lasted 12 and a half minutes, robbed Iowa State of the offense of one for sure, two probably, maybe three possessions.
Well,
just because of
just
eating
to be clear, the same Iowa State defense that allowed that is going to Kinnick on Saturday.
Well, no, it's not. And I'll explain to you why. So that drive very specifically happened immediately after the Caleb Bacon injury. So, and Caleb Bacon is the guy with the headset on. So what they were forced to do is take their entire plan at linebacker and they had to give somebody else the headset, and they had to completely reorganize on that drive. So one, John Haycock plays famously very, very vanilla defense in week one, basically calling no blitzes or anything. They just kind of sit back and cover 3, cover 2, and just figure it out type of thing. So they're already playing vanilla, and all of a sudden now they lost their quarterback on the defense. They lost the guy that had the headset and everything, so they had to totally reorganize on the fly. Now, that said, they should not have given up that many third downs, and even if you listen to their post-game interviews, all the players were said it was because they gave up yardage on first and second down that they shouldn't have given up, and they gave it up. Iowa State was perfect on shutting down third and long. So if anything, 3rd and 5 or longer, Iowa State was perfect in shutting that down. But when North Dakota was able to get to 3rd and 4 or shorter, they were able to often get the chains and convert via that quarterback just making something out of nothing, or just getting a run for 5 or 6 yards or something like that. And they were just able to put together a drive. And I tell you, in the stadium, it was miserable because it felt like it took 2 hours. But when you add that in to the fact and basically erase 2 possessions from the Iowa State offense, you're reducing their number of possessions quite a bit. I mean, Iowa State only ran the ball 18 times total in the game. Abusama had 5 carries and Carson Hansen had 6. So, they only put up 86 rushing yards, but they also didn't run that many offensive plays. And by the time they got to the fourth quarter, both teams were just chewing clock and just trying to get out of there, because North Dakota seemed perfectly happy from the get-go to just try to not lose by 40. So they were chewing clock and chewing clock and chewing clock. And then you get to the second half, and Matt Gamel's basically, they open up a 2-3 touchdown lead, and they pretty much pull everybody off the field.
You think the 23 play drive was just North Dakota trying to chew clock?
I mean, it was partly that. I mean, it was also
sure.
I didn't say it was just. I literally just said that Iowa State should have gotten off the field more.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, I guess here's
my point though is that that drive, I would argue, was largely a product of them. All of a sudden, they have to completely change what they were doing on defense because they lost Caleb Bacon right before that, and they have to rechange how they're communicating.
They also gave up a 14 play drive in the second half.
Sure. And you're still dealing with lots of very young linebackers.
Yeah, however, they're dealing with the same young linebackers this week.
I understand, but now you have an entire week to solidify your rotation, to solidify who's going to be running who's going to be hearing the headset.
Sure,
you have
got a better offensive line and a better running back core coming at them too.
Absolutely. My point though is that I would be shocked if the linebackers looked kind of as unstable as they were last week, because they have an entire week now to prep with whatever core they're going to go with, and they're also getting Caleb Brzina back, which I think is big. Also, the defensive line they were okay last week. They weren't great, but they were okay. They got a few plays, and I would expect that one to take a fairly big uptick there too, because I would say its defensive line has a lot of talent. Going into that, we heard a lot in the offseason about how they were talking about going to some more 4-down stuff, just personnel based on personnel, doing some more a 4-2-5 type of thing. To me, if you're ever going to do it, this is probably the time to try to work that in. You've got the defensive line talent to do it. You're already down a linebacker. You feel good about 2 to 3 of them for sure as far as starters go. You feel really good about Ebel. Sadowski started all of last year, so you're fine with him there. Zach Lovett is fine too. And then hopefully you can get Caleb Brzina in there. You can have a 4-man rotation there, as a 4-2-5 type.
So who's coming down as that hybrid guy?
Well, if they're running the 4-2-5, then they're just going to run 4-2-5. If they're going to run if they're going to try to use what they've got with the 3-3-5 stack, Bo Freeler is big enough. He can come down and be a pseudo linebacker. I think they would probably prefer to keep him away from the line of scrimmage to keep him healthier, just because he's had so many shoulder problems for the last few years. But if they're going to the 4-2-5, you don't bring a safety down in a 4-2-5. But if they're going to try to still work with a 3-3 stack, I would guess that the 3 starting linebackers would be Cooper Ebel, then either Jack Sadowski or Zach Lovett, and then Caleb Brzina on the other side. I would expect that to be your 3 if they're going to run with a 3-3 stack. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do. I mean, I have faith in John Haycock. He's one of the top 5 to 10 defensive coordinators in the country. I think at this point, I've gotten enough faith out of him. I have enough faith in him that he'll get it figured out.
Who would you rank number 1 as defensive coordinator, Levi?
I mean, Phil Parker's probably in the conversation. I'm not too big to admit that Iowa has a good defensive coordinator. No, I mean, Phil Parker, and there's probably some other ones that are good too. But, I feel like John Haycock has a lot of respect around college football for a good reason.
Phil Parker's got a lot of respect for John Haycock.
Yeah. And
Kirk Ferentz has a lot of respect for John
Haycock. I think the coaching staffs all have a lot of respect for each other, especially now that Brian Ferentz has gone, not dragging the average down. But as far as how Iowa State defensively will approach this game, it's gonna be we'll see what it looks like on Saturday. They may choose to do the 3-3 stack if they feel really good about having like Ebel and Brazine on the outside with Sadowski or Love in the middle. If they feel good with that, they'll run with the 3-3 stack because that's just what Iowa State's run for the last 7.5 years. If they feel good about the 4-2-5 and they feel good about switching it, they'll do that. I would expect to see at least a good mix of both, if not even a lean towards the 4-2-5, just based on what's going on. They'll shift as the game goes, just like every good team does. They make adjustments through the game. So that's how I would expect to approach it. So yes, you're correct that the same defense that gave up some chunk yardage to North Dakota is still the same defense there, or at least in the run game anyways. But I think this week they will be dealing with a lot less chaos in the front 6, front 7 than they were last week.
If I'm an Iowa State fan, I don't really have concerns about the offense right now. What I have concerns with is what we just talked about, is their ability to stop the run. Because if Iowa runs the ball effectively, then it does set up play action, and Cade doesn't have to throw 35 times. He's just got to throw 15 times. Maybe
that's how I would approach it if I were Iowa. I would just start running Caleb Johnson and see if Iowa State's defense can hang on for it, can slow him down. That's what. No, not slow him down like he's some unstoppable force. But right now you're dealing with those issues up front 6, front 7. If I were Iowa, I would try to test that all day and night. You don't need to test Iowa State secondary. They're good. You need to test that front 6 and front 7 to see how solid it is.
If I'm Iowa in the first quarter, I'm running the stable of running backs, and I'm going to figure out who's the hot hand or stylistically who's the best weapon against this defense.
Yeah. Last year it was Jazz Patterson, and Jazz didn't play last week due to a suspension. He is back this week. Kirk confirmed that. And Caleb Johnson didn't play in the first half. He, of course, is back, fully back. I've been getting ripped all day, Mark. I've had several Iowa fans come after me because I have made the statement that I think Kamari Moulton is still their best back overall, because it changes. And like throughout fall camp and throughout summer, that's all I was hearing, was that Kamari was ascending and Caleb was kind of just stuck in neutral. And I'm not saying Caleb doesn't have impressive physical traits. I think that's what everybody likes to point back to is, look at this guy's physique and he's 6'2". I'm like, okay. But guess what? You also have to do other things as related to vision, related to being willing to square your shoulders, put the pads down. Kamari Moulton really did a nice job in spite of the stats Saturday of playing through contact during a time in the game where Iowa's offensive line was struggling a little bit. It was more so that edge pressure that Illinois State was throwing at Iowa's backfield, and Kamari fought through that. I think we're going to see, like you said, Mark, a heavy dose of all these guys. I think it'd be foolish not to get Jazz Patterson some work, given the fact that he ran really well against Iowa State a year ago. And Leishon might be the odd man out this week because I don't know how healthy he is. To me, he didn't look right Saturday. But, hey, if you got 3 guys plus Leishon to run, great. And like you said, keep them all healthy and test to see who's hot that day, because it may change on a week-by-week basis. And like I said, I still think that if there's one place where I look at Iowa State from Saturday's game, they kind of struggled to control the line of scrimmage against a very young and green North Dakota offensive line. So it's not just the linebackers, to me, Levi. I didn't see a dominance up front that you would expect against a very young group of linemen. That also, by the way, real quick, context for Hawkeye fans, that North Dakota offensive line lost all-conference freshman Cade Borad, who transferred to Iowa in the offseason. He was part of that offensive line a year ago for the Fighting Hawks.
Yeah, like I said, the defensive line wasn't spectacular last week or anything like that. I would expect them to take a fairly good jump this week, especially if they go to the 4 down front, because Tyler Onyedem, Dominique Orange, J.R. Singleton, Kennard Snyder is a very, very stout front four and on that defensive line. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't try to wheel that 4 out there at least to start the game and just to see how it works type of thing. But Eli Rashid's a very good defensive line coach. I have faith in him to get things stabilized there.
So it's pronounced Onyedem?
Tyler Onyedem.
Onyedem. Okay. I was impressed with him. He was the one guy that stood out.
He's kind of a monster. If he can put his consistency together and really be a consistent motor, he's kind of a monster, especially physically. I mean, he's got a very, very high ceiling, I think.
He got a little bit of Will McDonald in him.
He's quite a bit bigger than Will McDonald. I think he's got. You can tell that he spent a little bit of time learning from Will McDonald because he's using a lot of those same spin moves that Will used. So you can see he's been watching some tape of Will. Little bit different. Like I said, he's a bigger athlete. I think he's probably got 30 pounds on Will, I would guess. So it'd be interesting, but I think he's got a very, very high ceiling.
And you know what I would bring up, and then Mark, if you want to take this conversation in a different direction, but here's what I will bring up about Saturday after watching the game on television. It sounds like you were in the stadium for the game, Levi, but one thing that
frying my ass off, it was so hot.
One thing that the FS1 commentators noted during the game is, hey, sometimes they say if you've got 2 punters, you've got none, and special teams are always a big deal in this game. So Iowa State played 2 punters on Saturday, which, like it or not, that probably is an indication they're not real confident in either. It's not like playing.
Actually, completely disagree on that one.
But you don't play 2 punters when you're
the reason Iowa State wheeled 2 punter is because Jace Gilbert has proven himself to be a very good pooch punter. I don't know if you watched what he kicked, but he was a very good short yardage punter. Tyler Perkins has a big leg, but he struggles with the on the opponent's half of the field. Jace Gilbert's he proved himself last week to be a very good pooch punter.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Having 2 punters and having 2 quarterbacks could not be more different. I know Iowa believes that punting is quarterbacking, but I promise you they're different positions.
No, Iowa just doesn't need 2 players to fulfill one role.
I mean, Iowa's punter was not awesome last week. He was okay, but he wasn't Torrey Taylor.
Well, they didn't need him. They scored 40 points.
They needed him in the first half, and he was not very good.
He was okay. He was okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I saw was Tyler Perkins had a very good long punt in the game, and Jace Gilbert had 2 very good short punts. Who gives a shit if it's the same guy? They did their job. What could it possibly matter?
Well, I'll tell you what it matters. Because
I'll tell you what, Iowa's that 2.5 point favorite on Iowa. That's coming from Iowa State playing the second punter last week.
Yeah. Let's I'm sure it does. So let's just see, because like I said, Iowa, you've seen a guy in Torrey Taylor who's been able to pooch. He's been able to kick the long balls.
I've been on the record saying Torrey Taylor was the 3rd Hawkeye ever.
But I'm simply saying, if you're real confident in your punter, it's a guy who can do both. And the Iowa State does not have that right now. So
it doesn't need it if you have 2 guys that can do it. Iowa State's going to moneyball the position.
You better hope
you don't get Jason. You don't replace Jason Giambi. You recreate him in the aggregate, and that's what Iowa State is doing with the punting situation.
Mark, you want to?
I feel like this is a non-issue. I don't know why we're talking about this.
Well, I understand the question from Corey because it does appear that way on the surface. But if you don't know what the situation is, if you've got one guy with a booming leg that's going to kick everything minus 50 and then everything inside the plus 50, you go with the.
Well, first of all, I just looked at the stats. Tyler Perkins' long was a 40. So let's not act like he's the second coming of Torrey Taylor.
I didn't say he was, but he's a better long punter. He's a better long punter than Jace Gilbert.
And Jace Gilbert was 40?
Well, he's had better longs in his career. I mean, that's
okay.
Well, but his long on Saturday was of 40, and Jace's long was 30.
What did he punt once?
Twice for 77 yards.
Wow.
So he had a 40 and he had
2 data points is a trend, I guess.
Had a 40 and he had a 37.
Okay, that's Tyler Perkins is a junior that's been here maybe he's a senior now. He's got a long career of being a good punter.
Hey, what will happen?
This is a very silly conversation,
Mark. What happens on Saturday if Reese Dakin takes the first punt and he literally punts it out of the stadium? What will Levi say at that point?
I want to test that guy for steroids. Is what I'm doing here.
Mark, we've got like 15 minutes left. Can you please tee us up on a segment that people I know really enjoy? And that is for Levi and I to make our picks when you go position by position. I know people love when we do this.
I would love this.
Okay.
First, Corey, I would like a brief answer from you on 2 Cade McNamara related topics. Number one would be, considering everything we heard out of Kirk and out of Tim Lester during August, that I know that I took a little bit more from it than you did in Cade not looking the best, and that quarterback decision was made late in camp. Are you encouraged by the way he threw the ball on Saturday? Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, where's my guy Brendan Sullivan?
Agreed.
They're struggling to score the entire first half.
Well,
why doesn't he get on the field? And then they've got the opportunity when they're up by 30 or 40 points in the second half to get him on the field. I don't understand.
I had a long conversation with Coach Patterson about this on the Sunday night show, and I'll just condense this back for the sake of time. I agree with you, and I am disappointed that they did not give Sullivan meaningful snaps. And I think that was a Kirk decision. I don't think that was a Seth Wallace or a Tim Lester decision. I believe that was premeditated, pre-discussed, and that was ultimately a Kirk Ferentz decision. I agree with you. Up 33-0, there's no reason at that point not to put Brendan or Marco in the game and give him meaningful snaps, as opposed to putting him in with a minute and a half and handing the ball off 2 or 3 times. I agree with you on that. I don't know about the first half, because as I was watching the game Saturday, I'm thinking, like, it was close, and some people felt like Brendan was the better option coming out of camp. But I do wonder, when you decide, okay, we're going with Cade to start the game, to start the season, pulling him in less than a half when you're ahead. I know it wasn't a big lead, but I do think that could mess with his psyche. So I don't know about pulling him at that point. And then once he got rolling in the third and even early fourth, I don't know that you pull him then either, because he's rolling and you want to keep that rhythm going. But I agree with you on, when you're up 33-0, at that point, let's move on. I was encouraged by his arm. He made a couple of poor decisions, one being when he's falling down and he throws it into double coverage and it's caught by Reese Vandersey. Again, having a receiver that can bail you out's great, but that was a bad decision. He had another throw that he underthrew Luke Lachey badly, and it could have easily been a touchdown. Lachey had his guy beat over the top, and so he underthrew a couple of guys, and that, to me, I'm no QB's guru, but it looked like footwork to me. Both of those throws were off his back foot. The one was he's falling backwards. So I would hope Tim Lester is going to have that corrected this week. And I'd say I was most impressed by his mobility. He had one play, I think the play of the game from Cade, without question, was a play, and I don't remember when it was, if it maybe it was early third, when he's pressured and scrambling and flushed right, flushed left, and then he's running left and throws it back across it. Well, not totally across his body, but throws down the sideline and puts the ball on the money to a young tight end in Zach Ortworth. That was a really gorgeous play by Cade McNamara. So that's made me, kind of perk up when I saw that. But yeah, I think just the mobility, it looks like he's comfortable back there now. And it didn't look like that at Kids Day. I can tell you that firsthand. It did not look like he was comfortable back there. So I believe Kirk when he says, hey, he's looked more comfortable, but it was going to take him some time to settle in. However, Mark, I said it to you this morning when I joined your live show briefly. I have to see it against Iowa State. I'm not bought into this offense. Like, people, Iowa's got an offense now. Like, okay, I get it. People want an offense. They want to see this, but they got to prove it against someone other than Illinois State, and they got to prove it more than 2 quarters. Like, they just do. Now, if they do it against Iowa State, say they go out and they score 30. I don't think they're going to get there, but if they were to do that against Iowa State, regardless of how it looks, I mean, unless it's 2 or 3 pick sixes, I'm probably going to walk away, overall being like, hey, yeah, I think they've got something right now. But I said back in July and August that I thought it was going to take a month for the passing game to evolve. And so if they come out there and struggle to throw the ball against Iowa State, it's not panic button time. I continue to say this. They're going to win this game. If they're going to win it, they're going to win it on the ground and being very opportunistic with play action. And if they can't run the ball effectively against Iowa State, then that's just like it was in the first half against Illinois State. I'm going to be like, that's a concern. And I know, I think John Haycock, he's a lot smarter than any of us are. He's going to have that pegged as his key. We got to figure out a way to slow them down on the ground and make them beat us over the top. So I think that's where the game comes down to.